What's up, Fluffle Gang? Welcome back, and if you're new here, my name is Luffy, and welcome to my channel. Today, we're talking about Skullface. Did you know, out of the 50 hours of gameplay that is MGS5, Skullface only shows up for about 45 minutes of it? In just 45 minutes, Skullface has to convey who he is, his history with Big Boss, what his motivations and goals are, and what his plans for Sahelanthropus are. What this boils down to is a 10-minute car ride where Skullface exposition dumps his life story on Venom. It's so hard to follow what he's saying as he packs away too much information into too little time. The first several times I heard Skullface's speech, I had no idea what he was talking about, nor did I care. Not much had been done to build Skullface up into a memorable villain by that point, and I was much more focused on the impending Sahelanthropus fight. If you're like me and missed what Skullface was saying, let's sit down and really break down what he was trying to tell Venom in his speech. Just a heads up, this video is going to have spoilers for Metal Gear Solid 5 and Peace Walker. While you're here, please subscribe and turn notifications on. We're almost at 1,000 subscribers, and once we hit that goal, we'll do something fun, like stream a little MGS2. One of the most important things to understand about Skullface is that he's driven by a lust for revenge. At a young age, Skullface was kidnapped from his village and forced to work for and speak the language of those who had raided his village. Words became representative of Skullface's internment with his captors. Skullface tells Venom,
"With each new post, my masters changed, along with the words they made me speak."
Through his experiences, he starts to believe that words are representative of the people using them, for better or for worse. He talks about how his thoughts, personality, and how he saw right and wrong changed each time he switched languages, implying that as he was exposed to new people and culture through language, his opinions and beliefs were influenced. He sums this up saying,
"War changed me."
Summarizing his experience with how war stripped him from his culture and home. Skullface goes on to say,
"I was invaded by words, burrowing and breeding inside me."
Reinforcing that Skullface views words as a representation of the harm colonization has on the victims of colonization. Skullface hyperfixates on words. He explains his belief by quoting the philosopher Emile Cioran.
"It is no nation we inhabit, but a language. Make no mistake, our native tongue is our true fatherland."
No matter where we end up, our language is indicative of where we were raised, our fatherland. Stripping us of our language takes our culture and the ways in which we express ourselves away. Skullface being forced to speak the language of his captors forced him to assimilate into their culture and stripped him of his history more than simply taking him from his village could. Before Venom and Skullface's car ride, Skullface talks about culture and assimilation. He says America was never made up of one people, that the country is diverse. The citizens didn't assimilate to one way of thinking, and instead live alongside one another. Zero wanted to create a single consciousness, which Skullface didn't agree with. He says unilateralism can't be entrusted to one individual, but Zero pursued it anyways through the use of words. Zero designed systems to control information and create context to control the world at large. Skullface explains that because Zero was born where he was destined to speak English and filter all his beliefs through the cultural beliefs of his fatherland. Trusting a single person, as all people are biased by where they were raised, to filter information and guide all people towards a common goal would destroy the opposing cultures that one person, Zero, was assimilating. To Skullface, Zero was weaponizing English. Zero's controlling the narrative was similar to how information was controlled by Skullface's captors. He was forced to speak their approved language and operate on information approved by his captors for him to know. He was forced to assimilate, but was also controlled by what his captors decided to grant him with. Info and supplies-wise. Skullface saw his fatherland and culture destroyed and viewed Zero's plans to unite the world under a single will as the same thing. Skullface has an obsession with language and controlling language through the vocal cord parasites because of his history of having his own language controlled and because of Zero. He himself is infected with the Hungarian strain of the vocal cord parasites, his native tongue, and as he can never speak his native tongue again, he can't return to his own country. Skullface laments,
"My fatherland, my truth was stolen from me."
Skullface understands the pain and division war can bring in an intimate way that someone like Zero could never relate to. And by the way, if you need a refresher about what the vocal cord parasites are, I have a link to my video on the vocal cord parasites in the description below. After relaying his thoughts about language and his history with his native tongue, Skullface explains,
"All that's left is the future, and mine is revenge on those who leech off the words of their fellow man."
Skullface focused himself on revenge against Zero. Zero plans to unify the world through one authority, his authority, by controlling information and providing the context he deems fit to guide society in the direction he wants it to go in. This is similar to Skullface's experience with his captors, and thus he resents Zero. Skullface intends to wipe out all language, English included. He explains Zero crafted codes and systems to control people and says,
"And the mother tongue of all those codes is English."
Skullface sees a parallel in how his language was stripped from him and how Zero operates in only English. All of his influence is biased, based on his experiences which would come in conflict with different cultures/languages. As Zero was born into a country where he was taught English growing up, that means all these plans and codes are going to be born from beliefs instilled in him from birth from his fatherland, and are all going to be in English. Skullface overcorrects and vows to wipe out the English language to wipe out all of Zero's codes. He makes a point to clarify he isn't using the English vocal cord parasites as an ethnic cleanser, but as a tool to free the world from Zero. Skullface wants to be the authority instead of Zero and intends to achieve that through force. After destroying language, Skullface explains,
The world will need a new common tongue, a language of nukes. My metal ears shall be the thread by which all countries are bound together in equality. No words will be needed. Every man will be forced to recognize his neighbor. People will swallow their pain. They will link lost hands. And the world will become one. This war is peace.
He's operating on the belief of, once everyone is special, no one is special. His plan is to supply the world with an overabundance of nukes. Once everyone has their own nuke to act as their deterrence, no one will be willing to attack another country, as they all have nukes, effectively stopping war and achieving peace. In his speech to Venom, Skullface also says he thinks Zero was wrong about the boss's will. The thought of Zero chatting about the boss's will to Skullface makes my skin crawl. What warped version of the boss's will does Zero pass on to Skullface? We're not here to talk about that today though. We're just gonna go over what Skullface says about the boss's will in his speech to Venom, and then we'll go over how close Skullface got to it in another video. Skullface felt he understood the boss's will better than Zero because Zero had never had his culture stripped from him. He's never had to assimilate and give up his culture and history. The divide his captors forced on him between who he had to be and who he was / his culture made Skullface believe he understood what the boss meant by politics dividing nations and people way more than Zero, who had never faced such a hardship. He thought that by ridding the world of what divides it, language, and joining people together by the common tongue of deterrence, that he'd achieve something closer to the boss's will than Zero. Again, we're not going to get into whether or not Skullface was right about that in this video. One other thing I want to mention is when Skullface says,
We are all but dead men forced to walk upon this earth.
Rip Skullface. I wish you would have been able to talk to Big Boss. He would have had some things to say. As in, he would have agreed with that sentiment, which is a little wild. BB is leaps and bounds a better villain than Skullface, but it's interesting to see parallel themes / beliefs between them. When Skullface is staring down his death, he says,
Cypher will rewrite the records, and I will vanish from human memory. But the thirst for revenge that I have planted will infest the system. No one can stop it now. Sahelanthropus will unleash that thirst unto the future.
Skullface's plans for Sahelanthropus only works if there's someone controlling Sahelanthropus. Yeah, the existence of Sahelanthropus could terrify nations into complying with Skullface's demands, but he's almost dead by this point. He's practically on fire. Without him, the threat fizzles out. Unless Venom and crew took control of Sahelanthropus after the world is exposed to it, which is an interesting thought. The Diamond Dogs take Sally after its defeat as a symbol of their accomplishments and might. I wonder if that would have been different had the world seen Sahelanthropus. I can see Kaz using Sally as a deterrent to terrify the world with, especially after Peace Walker and the Nuke and Zeke, and with the scene we get where Kaz is like Skullface's predecessor / double. Both have such a lust for revenge. Skullface mentioning Zero is so sad. Zero had such a negative impact on so many lives. I don't think that's what the boss would have wanted, Zero. Skullface's language and culture was stripped from him when he was forced from his village to work for the invading soldiers. His infection with the Hungarian strain of the vocal cord parasites would ensure he could never return to his fatherland in the way he wanted to. Working for Zero, he learned about his plans to create systems and codes to unite the entire world under his name. This unilateralism was something Skullface opposed and fought against, though his methods involved stripping everyone of their language to level the playing field. Force is a universal language everyone understands, and by arming the world with nukes, countries would cease attacking one another, as an attack would mean a nuclear retaliation. Skullface would control the supply of nukes, and so would put himself at the top of this new regime. Sahelanthropus would act as his enforcer and mascot. I hope this clears up what the hell Skullface is talking about in his car raid with Venom. If not, please comment down below and I'll do my best to answer any questions. And thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. I really appreciate it. Please like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Like I've been saying, we're so close to 1,000 subscribers, which is just really exciting. More importantly than any of that, please take care of yourselves, and I will see you all in the next one. Thank you.